The first discipline of dreams, the first commandment of power, is to know who you are. Before you can ask who he is, before you measure his worth, before you demand his loyalty or respect, you must first define yourself with absolute clarity. Too many people walk through life searching for validation in others. They measure their value through the eyes of a man, through the attention they receive, through the approval they are given. That is weakness, and weakness has never commanded respect. To be treated like a queen, you must first crown yourself. That crown is forged from self-awareness, self-definition, and unshakable discipline. Knowing who you are is not about shallow labels. It is not about your job title, your appearance, or what you post online. Knowing who you are means understanding your values, your principles, and your standards. It means you can look in the mirror and know exactly what you stand for, what you refuse to tolerate, and what you are willing to sacrifice for the life you want. If you do not know who you are, then you will bend to every opinion, you will adapt to every man, you will compromise for every situation, and eventually you will lose yourself. The one who does not know herself is like a ship without a compass, drifting unstable at the mercy of every storm. Discipline begins with identity. Discipline means you do not lie to yourself about what you want, you do not hide from your weaknesses, and you do not escape into illusions. You confront yourself. You sit in silence and ask, who am I? What do I want? What will I never accept? These questions are the foundation of strength. Men will ask who you are without ever using those words. They will test you. They will push boundaries. They will see how far they can go. If you do not know yourself, you will not even recognize when you are being tested. You will react instead of leading. You will cling instead of commanding. But when you know yourself, when you live with discipline, you answer every test with action. You draw lines in stone, not in sand. You live as someone who cannot be shaken. That is when they realize they are standing before a queen. The truth is, if you do not define yourself, the world will do it for you. Men will decide your role. Society will hand you a script. Weak people will try to mold you into what makes them comfortable. But none of those definitions will serve your dreams. None of them will respect your power. This is why self-knowledge is not a luxury. It is a weapon. It protects you from manipulation. It shields you from disrespect. It sharpens your presence until every room you walk into knows there is strength in front of it. To know who you are is to create an identity so strong that no one dares to treat you as ordinary. This requires discipline because knowing who you are is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. Every decision you make either reinforces your identity or erodes it. Every choice is a declaration of who you are becoming. If you say you are strong but run from challenges, you are lying to yourself. If you say you are disciplined but make excuses every morning, you are betraying yourself. Integrity with yourself is the deepest form of discipline. Men see it, they feel it, they cannot ignore it. A woman who knows herself does not need to announce her power, she radiates it. The reason many women are treated like options instead of priorities is because they never set their identity in stone. They chase him before they know themselves. They ask, who is he? What does he have to offer? Does he love me? Does he value me? But the real question is, do you value yourself? Do you even know yourself? Because when you do, the answer about him becomes clear. If he matches your vision, he stays. If he does not, he goes. There is no confusion, no chasing, no begging. Queens do not ask for thrones. They build them by knowing who they are. This knowledge also frees you from the disease of comparison. You no longer look at other women and measure yourself against them. You no longer compete for attention. You no longer seek approval in the eyes of strangers. When you know yourself, your competition disappears. The only competition left is with your own potential. And when a man sees that you are not competing with anyone else, that you are standing in your own lane with certainty, his respect multiplies. He knows he cannot shake you, he cannot break you, and he cannot buy you. That kind of strength makes him elevate himself or step aside. So before you ever ask who he is, before you ever measure his character, you must know your own. Who you are determines how he treats you. Who you are determines whether he sees a queen or just another follower. Who you are determines the respect you command the moment you walk into a room. And if you do not know who you are, then you will never truly know who He is either, because your vision will always be clouded by your own uncertainty. There is a dangerous mistake that many people make in relationships, in dreams, and in life. They focus on the other person before they have even defined themselves. They study him, question him, demand to know his character, his values, his intentions. But here is the truth: none of those questions matter until you know yourself. How can you measure someone else when you have not measured your own soul? How can you test his strength when you have not tested your own discipline? Before you ever ask who he is, you must stand in the mirror with brutal honesty and know exactly who you are. When you do not know yourself, you enter situations blind. You walk into relationships guessing, hoping, and improvising. You become dependent on someone else to define your worth. If he approves, you feel valuable. If he rejects, you feel broken. That is not strength. That is slavery. The discipline of dreams begins with identity. It begins with creating an internal foundation so strong that no man, no circumstance, no rejection can shake it. Knowing who you are is the armor that protects you from disappointment, manipulation, and disrespect. Without that armor, you are vulnerable, exposed, and easily controlled. To know who you are means clarity. It means being able to state without hesitation what you value most, what you demand from yourself, and what you will not tolerate under any condition. Too many people compromise because they are not rooted. They change their standards to keep someone close. They abandon their dreams to fit into someone else's life. They silence their own voice to hear applause. That is what happens when you ask who he is before knowing yourself. You shrink, you bend, you lose. But when you know yourself, your presence becomes unshakable. Your words carry weight. Your silence commands attention. You are no longer chasing, you are leading. Discipline is the bridge between who you are now and who you want to be. Without discipline, your identity will always be unstable. You will say one thing today and live the opposite tomorrow. You will declare standards but break them the moment emotions rise. That is why men test boundaries. They want to see if what you say matches what you live. And the truth is, many crumble. They speak about respect yet accept disrespect. They speak about strength yet fold under pressure. A queen does not fold. She does not negotiate her identity. Her discipline makes her consistent, and consistency creates authority. Men cannot help but respect what is consistent. Another danger of not knowing yourself is that you will be fooled by appearances. You will ask, "Who is he?" and be impressed by his words, his charm, his surface. But if you do not know who you are, you cannot see beneath the mask. You cannot separate illusion from truth. Self-awareness gives you vision. When you know yourself, you can recognize who is genuine and who is pretending, because you are no longer clouded by your own confusion. You see clearly because your own identity is clear. Knowing who you are also means knowing your purpose. Without purpose, you drift, and when you drift, you cling to anyone who seems like an anchor. You accept less than you deserve just to avoid being alone. But when you have purpose, you move with direction. You do not need someone to complete you. You need someone who aligns with you. There is a difference. Weakness seeks completion. Strength seeks alignment. And that strength only comes from identity rooted in discipline. Every decision you make, every habit you build, every standard you enforce is a reflection of who you are. If you allow disrespect, it means you have not yet disciplined yourself to demand more. If you accept mediocrity, it means you have not defined excellence within yourself. If you live in confusion, it means you have not taken the time to sit with yourself and write your own rules. Discipline forces you to stop drifting. It forces you to build structure. It forces you to answer the hardest question of all: who am I? Men respect what is clear. They respect what is firm. They respect what cannot be shaken. But you cannot expect them to respect what you have not defined. Respect starts within. When you respect yourself enough to build discipline, to live consistently with your values, to stand firm in your standards, that respect radiates outward. You do not need to beg for it. You do not need to demand it. It flows naturally because people treat you based on how you treat yourself. So before you analyze him, before you question him, before you ask whether he is worthy of your time, your love, your presence, you must turn the question inward. You must be ruthless in your self-examination. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when challenges rise? Who are you when temptation appears? If you cannot answer these questions with discipline and clarity, then no man can answer them for you. And if you cannot define yourself, you will forever lie defined by others. The most dangerous mistake you can ever make is to walk into any relationship, any dream, or any commitment without first knowing exactly who you are. If you do not define yourself, someone else will define you. If you do not build your own foundation, you will end up living on the unstable ground of another person's approval. This is why the discipline of self-knowledge is not just important, it is non-negotiable. Before you ever ask who he is, before you measure his worth, you must establish your own identity with absolute certainty. Knowing who you are is not about creating a temporary image or projecting a mask for the world to see. It is about building a core identity so strong that it cannot be shaken by rejection, failure, or disappointment. Too many people approach relationships with a weak foundation, hoping to discover themselves through someone else's validation. They ask, does he love me? Does he respect me? Does he see my value? But those are the wrong questions. The first question is always, do you love yourself? Do you respect yourself? Do you see your own value? Because if the answer to those questions is no, then no amount of attention from him will ever fill that emptiness. Self-knowledge requires discipline because it is not always comfortable to look in the mirror and confront the truth. It is not easy to admit your flaws, your weaknesses, your fears. But queens are not built on comfort. They are built on discipline. To know yourself, you must strip away illusions. You must separate what you want from what you need, what you value from what is meaningless, what you will accept from what you refuse to tolerate. Without this clarity, you will live at the mercy of circumstances, always adjusting to others, always compromising, always bending, never leading. When you know yourself, everything changes. Your words carry weight because they are rooted in conviction. Your presence commands attention because you no longer seek permission. Your standards remain firm because they are not built on emotion but on principle, and men recognize this immediately. They may not always say it, but they feel it. They sense the difference between a woman who is searching for herself and a woman who has already defined herself. One becomes dependent, the other becomes magnetic. One chases approval, the other commands respect. Discipline in self-knowledge also means consistency. It is not enough to say, I know who I am, and then live in contradiction. If you declare strength but live in weakness, your words are empty. If you demand respect but tolerate disrespect, your identity is broken. Men notice this. People notice this. They may not speak it, but they see it. Real self-knowledge is shown in actions, not words. It is revealed in the way you live, the choices you make, the boundaries you enforce. Discipline is what keeps your identity aligned with your actions. Without discipline, you drift. With discipline, you build authority. Another reason self-knowledge is essential is because it gives you vision. Without knowing yourself, you cannot truly see others. You will misjudge, misinterpret, and misunderstand because your perspective is clouded by confusion. But when you are clear within, your perception sharpens. You can see who he really is without being blinded by charm, appearances, or false promises. This clarity protects you from manipulation and wasted time. It allows you to separate men of substance from men of illusion. You cannot know who he is until you know who you are, because your vision depends on your own identity. There is also a freedom that comes with knowing yourself. Freedom from comparison, freedom from insecurity, freedom from dependence. When you know yourself, you stop measuring your worth against other women. You stop competing for attention. You stop needing constant reassurance. You become steady, centered, unshakable. And men feel this. They know they cannot play games with you because you do not seek validation from them. You validate yourself. That independence is powerful, and it forces respect. But this freedom does not come cheaply. It comes through sacrifice. It comes through discipline. You must be willing to walk away from anything and anyone that does not align with who you are. You must be willing to endure solitude rather than settle for confusion. You must be willing to say no to short-term comfort in order to protect your long-term vision. This is not easy. But queens are not built on ease. They are built on endurance. Every day, you are either reinforcing your identity or weakening it. Every decision you make is a reflection of who you are becoming. If you know yourself, your decisions align with your values. If you do not, your decisions are random, emotional, and inconsistent. And when you live inconsistently, you cannot demand consistency from others. Respect begins within. Authority begins within. Strength begins within. That is why knowing yourself comes before questioning Him. Because until you have built your own foundation, you will never be able to test His. So before you ever ask who He is, before you ever measure His loyalty, His strength, His vision, you must know your own. You must build your identity so firmly that no rejection can shatter it, no disappointment can weaken it, and no man can define it for you. There is a universal law in life. If you do not know who you are, you will always settle for less than you deserve. You will accept treatment that is beneath you. You will compromise values that should never be compromised, and you will chase validation that should have been unnecessary in the first place. Too many people fall into the trap of asking about Him before ever defining themselves. They ask, what does He bring to the table? Does He respect me? Does He truly care? But none of those questions matter until you have built your own foundation. The one who does not know herself is always at risk of being shaped by someone else's vision, and that is how power is lost. Knowing who you are is the root of strength. It is not about repeating affirmations without action. It is not about projecting confidence online while living in quiet insecurity. It is about building an unshakable identity that is forged through discipline. You cannot know yourself without discipline because discipline forces you to strip away illusions. It forces you to separate your true values from the ones that society handed you. It forces you to ask the hard questions: what do I stand for? What do I refuse to tolerate? What is the vision I will not compromise? Without those answers, you are living on borrowed time, chasing approval instead of creating authority. When you know yourself, you move differently. You no longer enter relationships hoping to be completed. You enter them already complete, already secure, already powerful. A woman who knows herself does not beg for respect, she commands it. She does not chase attention, she attracts it. She does not accept half effort. She requires excellence because she has already demanded excellence from herself. Men recognize this difference immediately. They can feel whether you are anchored in identity or drifting in confusion. And the truth is simple: a man may play with the one who is unsure of herself, but he cannot help but respect the one who is certain. Self-knowledge also protects you from manipulation. When you do not know yourself, you are easily swayed by words, easily controlled by emotions, and easily blinded by surface appearances. You begin to mistake charm for character, promises for proof, and attention for love. But when you know yourself, your vision sharpens. You see through masks, you test words with actions, and you recognize games before they even begin. This clarity comes only from discipline. It is not enough to say you want respect. You must live in such a way that your entire presence demands it. There is also a magnetic energy that radiates from people who know themselves. They walk into a room and they do not have to announce their strength. It is felt. Their silence is powerful because it is not born from insecurity, but from certainty. Their words are powerful because they are rooted in conviction. Their standards are powerful because they do not bend under pressure. This energy cannot be faked. It is not built overnight. It is the result of discipline repeated daily. Choices aligned with identity and boundaries enforced without apology. That is why knowing who you are comes before questioning who He is. Because until you carry that energy, you will never truly know whether His respect is genuine or whether it is simply a performance to impress your uncertainty. Discipline and identity also means sacrifice. You must be willing to walk away from anyone who does not align with who you are, no matter how much you desire their presence. You must be willing to endure solitude rather than settle for disrespect. You must be willing to close doors that lead to comfort but not to growth. This is where many fail. They compromise identity for attention, they weaken their standards for temporary affection, and they confuse compromise with connection. But when you know yourself, compromise has limits. Your vision is non-negotiable. Your values are not for sale. Your respect cannot be bought. Every choice you make either reinforces your identity or erodes it. When you choose discipline, you reinforce. When you choose excuses, you erode. When you choose boundaries, you reinforce. When you choose tolerance of disrespect, you erode. This is why knowing yourself requires constant vigilance. It is not a one-time decision, but a lifelong practice. And the more disciplined you are, the stronger your identity becomes. Men cannot ignore this. They may not speak it, but they sense it. They treat you differently because you treat yourself differently. The reason many ask, "Who is he?" too soon is because they are trying to fill a void inside themselves. They are hoping he will provide clarity that they refuse to create on their own. But the truth is, no man can give you what you refuse to give yourself. No man can define the woman who has not defined herself, and no man can respect the one who has not first demanded respect from within. To know yourself is to build the throne. Only then can you truly decide who deserves to sit in your presence. So, before you analyze his character, before you test his loyalty, before you question his vision, the discipline of dreams requires that you know your own, because if you do not know who you are, every question you ask about him will be answered through insecurity instead of clarity, through weakness instead of strength, through desperation instead of discipline. The discipline of dreams demands that before you ever question another person's intentions, before you measure his strength, before you evaluate his character, you must first establish your own. Too many waste precious time searching for answers about him while they remain unanswered within themselves. They ask, is he loyal? Is he ambitious? Does he truly care? But these questions are meaningless when your own identity is undefined. You cannot measure him correctly if you have no standard within yourself. The one who does not know who she is will always misjudge who he is. To know who you are means to live with clarity. It means your values are non-negotiable, your boundaries are firm, and your direction is set. Without this clarity, you become vulnerable to confusion. You begin to confuse attention with love, persistence with loyalty, and desire with respect. This is how people get trapped in cycles of disappointment. They chase men, they analyze men, they obsess over men, without ever stopping to discipline themselves in the knowledge of who they are. When you know yourself, you save yourself from wasted years, from empty promises, from broken standards. Self-knowledge is not built through comfort. It is built through discipline. It requires that you confront the truth about yourself, the strengths you possess, the weaknesses you hide, the fears you run from, the dreams you have buried. Knowing who you are means you stop running from yourself. You stop relying on someone else to tell you your worth. You stop depending on his validation to feel alive. That is the mark of a queen. She crowns herself before anyone else can. Her power is not borrowed. It is not gifted. It is not granted by approval. It is built through discipline, sacrifice, and relentless self-definition. When you know who you are, your energy changes. You no longer walk into a room asking silently for attention. You walk in with presence. Your body language shifts. Your words gain weight. Your silence becomes powerful. Men see it, men feel it, men react to it. Respect is not something you beg for. It is something you embody. It flows naturally because your identity is firm. When you know yourself, you carry authority without ever needing to announce it. That authority becomes the invisible crown that makes others recognize your value. The danger of not knowing yourself is that you become a reflection of whoever is closest to you. If he is strong, you feel strong. If he is weak, you feel weak. If he is respectful, you feel respected. If he is careless, you feel worthless. That is the trap of dependency. When your identity is tied to someone else, you lose control of your own destiny. But when your identity is built within, no man can shake it. His presence may add to your life, but it does not define your life. That is the power of discipline in self-knowledge. It makes you unshakable. This discipline also protects your vision. When you know yourself, you know your purpose. You are not distracted by temporary pleasures. You are not deceived by surface appearances. You can look at a man and see clearly whether he aligns with your mission or whether he is simply a detour. Most people fail here because they enter relationships without vision. They hope to find purpose through connection instead of establishing purpose before connection. But a queen does not wander. She does not drift. She moves with direction, and her identity filters out what does not belong. Knowing who you are also eliminates the disease of comparison. You no longer measure yourself against other women. You no longer compete for validation. You no longer fight for position in someone else's life. When you are certain of yourself, your competition disappears. You are not in a race with anyone. You are in alignment with your own vision. That certainty creates peace, and peace is rare. Men sense that calmness. They know you are not desperate, not reaching, not clinging. That is when respect becomes inevitable. But identity requires sacrifice. You cannot know who you are while you are constantly distracted by noise, by gossip, by meaningless pursuits. You cannot know yourself if you never spend time alone in silence, asking the hard questions and facing the uncomfortable answers. You cannot know yourself if you compromise every principle just to keep someone in your life. Discipline means you cut away what weakens you. You let go of what does not align. You stand firm when others bend. This sacrifice is not easy, but it is necessary. Greatness never grows in comfort. Identity never strengthens without resistance. Every day your life is giving you chances to prove who you are. When you wake up and choose discipline over excuses, you reinforce your identity. When you set a boundary and hold it, you reinforce your identity. When you walk away from disrespect without hesitation, you reinforce your identity. Every action is a declaration of self, and the stronger your actions align with your values, the more unshakable your identity becomes. That is why knowing who you are must come before asking who he is. Because only when your identity is firm can you truly measure another's. A man cannot define you. A man cannot crown you. A man cannot complete you. If you do not know yourself, you will always misinterpret who he is. But when you know yourself, you see clearly. You know who aligns with your vision and who does not. You know who respects your crown and who does not. And you know that before you ever ask who he is, you have already established the unshakable truth of who you are.